And here we go. We are live. Hi, everybody.
Hello, everyone.
Coming at you. We are live in the chat. As always, this is pre-recorded, but we are here today with Colin Daileda, who wrote Lost in the Shallows. We're excited to have Colin, and we're going to tell you all about him in a moment, but we want to give people a chance to join. So we thought we'd start with a little chat, and we wanted to talk about, Colin, your answer in the time travel question.
Yeah. So what we do with our contributors is they record videos about. There's a main video about their story and the inspiration behind it and their life story, and then we throw them some fun questions as well. And one of them is what you would do with a time travel machine. And Colin, you said that you would go back in time to tell your childhood self that you were allowed to eat more donuts in your life.
Which was it was an amazing answer.
I stand by it.
You should. And I actually identify with that on a deep level, because when I was a kid, so my parents decided that they didn't want to forbid things from me, but they also didn't want me to overindulge. And so when I was a child, I actually had an annual donut quota of 3. I was allowed 3 donuts a year. So you could talk to me as a kid and ask when I had a donut, and I could tell you the date, I could tell you the type, and I could tell you how many donuts I had left in my quota for the year.
Amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I actually, first of all, I had a donut today, just so you all know.
You're kidding.
I have no quota, unfortunately for me, but I did eat one today. I feel like, I mean, I don't know, everybody's body is different. I understand that, but you know, as my body has worked out until this moment, I feel like I could have eaten, I don't know, 2-3 times the number of donuts that I was allowed to eat as a child. I think I would have been roughly the same. You know, I don't think there was like any damage to like my education, my overall like functioning as a person. I don't think. So I just, I would go back and be like, listen, I don't know how you'll do it. I know your parents aren't exactly driving you to Dunkin' Donuts every day. You don't have access to a car. You can't drive a car even if you did have access to it. But if you figure it out, don't worry about it. Build yourself into it, Don't feel bad about not telling mom and dad, because it's fine. It's all good. It doesn't nothing matters in this little donut realm. Nothing matters. So I'm glad that you appreciated that answer.
We did.
And I stand by it very much. So thank you.
I can't believe you had a donut today. Actually, I stopped by my local bakery this morning because I was inspired by your donut answer. They don't make donuts, but I did pick up a cupcake, which I will eat probably right after this. So
Eat it there. I was just telling you two earlier, I'm in St. Michael's, which is a like little town in Maryland, about an hour and a half north of home, because my parents are both vaccinated now and they demanded to go somewhere anywhere. And I saw yesterday that this place had a bakery and they served donuts. And so I was like, guess where we're coming tomorrow for breakfast? Guess where we're going? And it was delightful. It was a good decision, as it almost always is.
Well, we're happy that you're exercising your adult freedom.
Yes, and in honor of that, Sabine got a cupcake. I did, in fact, go and get donut holes today.
Amazing. You're just on point. I love the theme of this whole episode.
Yes.
Just keep talking about donuts for 30 minutes.
Yes, this is the theme today is donuts.
Yeah.
I actually wrote about donuts. Yeah.
That's what we're talking about. You wrote about donuts. We're going to talk about donuts.
I've only ever written about donuts. It's fun.
Well, I think that is a great place to jump into what we're actually here to talk about, which is your wonderful story. This is our first article club of the new issue. So for people who are joining us who don't know who we are, even though we've been talking to you for a little bit, I'm Samani Babu.
I'm Sabine K. Bergman.
And we're the co-founders of Hidden Compass. And we're excited to be talking to Colin Daileda about his story, It was a time travel story in our latest issue, and Colin is a freelance journalist based in Bengaluru, India. He has written and photographed for a ton of places. Long reads, The Atlantic, Atlas Obscura, Deadspin, lots of places.
Earth Island Journal,
yes.
Rose and Kingdoms, I think, was in there too.
Washington
Yeah.
Post.
Washington Post.
So yeah, just a few little publications.
Mhm.
And,
try to space it out,
that's right. That's right. Before Bengaluru, he was a reporter for Mashable, based in New York City, from where he often traveled across the United States writing about state violence and social justice, and covered some of the early BLM protests as well.
Yeah, most late 2014 is when I started traveling. Yeah, I think my boss literally came. I remember her marching out of a meeting. I don't remember what the meeting was about, but I remember her marching out of a meeting. And she was like, "Get on a plane." I was like, "I don't know where I'm going." And then
Wow.
and she was like, "You have 3 hours." I was like, "What are you talking about?" And then I got on a plane, and that's pretty much how and so 2015 all the way through, Baltimore, South Carolina a few times, lots of other places, and in the 2016, right before Mashable kind of sliced off a bunch of its staff. But so a lot of travel and a lot of protests, and it feels all very similar and the same still, which is a little bit depressing, but also brings back a lot of reporting memories.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, you have a very impressive list of bylines, and we were honored to publish you at Hidden Compass. We like to think that maybe we're one of your favorite places to have published with.
You were, I mean, I say this like, I think I tweeted it earlier this week, but I mean this very sincerely. Like, there are just not a lot of places that engage in the level of editing that you guys do, just both conceptually. So shout out to Katie for that, because I mean, she was great in just going through the article and not even, not caring about line by line at first, just going through it and saying, okay, this is how we can reshape it to make it better. But then also just like very granularly, just the fact checking. I mean, she came to me with something like, I don't know, it was like 2 weeks ago. She was like, I don't think this is quite how we should refer to the shark's tail fin. And I was like, what are you even saying? And then I looked at it, I was like, you're right. I was like, I didn't even think about this. Like, and I agonize over the facts because I know that most publications don't do any of this, don't do any fact checking. And it's like my nightmare to get something grossly wrong. Like literal nightmares, I've had them. And so I don't know. I mean, to have that kind of fact checking was not only, I mean, surprisingly nice just from the reporting standpoint, but it was also very calming to me because I know that a publication is standing behind the facts of a publication. It's not just my job, which is very, very anxiety inducing for me.
Yeah.
Constant, but definitely anxiety inducing. So yeah, I definitely one of my favorites. I mean that very much.
Thank you. We didn't say that fishing for a compliment, but we do appreciate it. And big shout out to Katie. Katie Narowski is our managing editor, and she is fantastic. And we definitely enjoy kind of the thorough fact checking and sometimes the rabbit holes that we get to go down on that in that fact checking process as well.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
That's one of the few good things about fact checking, is my opinion.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, we really see it as a partnership between the publication and the journalists, because these are pieces that we want to be the best pieces that we can publish possibly. And with every story that we publish, we have a fundraising campaign. And so we ask people to contribute, and this story is no exception. So Lost in the Shallows has a fundraising campaign, and it's a fascinating and evocative time travel feature. It explores the mysteries of a shark with an impressive disappearing act, but it also gets into the themes of development's impact on the Sundarbans ecosystem in India and the changing nature of exploration itself. So there are a lot of layers to this story, which is what we love at Hidden Compass.
I like to think there are lots of layers, yes.
There certainly are. So I have to ask, how did this story first come on your radar?
Yeah, I was trying to remember even the lead up to today. I was just trying to rack my brain over like the beginnings. I was definitely trying to write about species other than people.
Mm,
And not that humans are ever going to be devoid from that story, for obvious reasons, but um, and even in just the actual telling of the story, of course, people are going to be involved. But I wanted to try to be a little less people centric, to be a little bit more environmental centric, to make sure that like the environment and the animal itself is a character on a level playing field as the people who are involved in one way or another, if that makes sense.
mhm.
And so I don't remember exactly how I came upon the Alifa's paper. Alifa, who is the researcher in the story. I don't, but I know that I was reading. I think I actually came upon a paper before hers about um, this genus of sharks that were kind of rare and river sharks, and I knew that they had sort of like this very mysterious history. I had a vague idea of that being a thing after reading one of these papers, and I think from there I kind of, as you said earlier, went down a rabbit hole a bit with this kind of species. And
Mm.
once I saw that this 129-year gap between
Right.
one recorded sighting and another sighting, I was like, aha, I have I have like I have the thing that can make people interested right off the bat, right? And then I knew that I was already like pretty familiar with what had happened in the Sunderbunds from the mid 1800s to now, and the various ecological changes, and the various ecological changes that different governments have enacted upon that region. And I thought, okay, like here is not only a weird story about a shark, people love sharks anyway, great start, weird disappearance, excellent. Um, and so those things I know I could grab people, and then I was like, okay, but I can also, because of the location, tell the story of this place, and then I just needed someone who could bring it into the now, and that was Alifa. And I read her paper, and I was like, okay, like
Mm.
this person seems like a good bet for that person. I talked to her, and she was great, and she was willing to just sit there and answer all my inane questions. And I would go back and ask her the same questions because I wanted more detail. And
Mhm.
she didn't. There was like no hesitation. She was very willing to talk, and she was great in that regard. And so I was like, all right, I've pieced it together here, at least in my head. Hopefully it works. And then I started typing.
Mm.
That's you hit the things that made you interested are also a lot of the things that make a hidden compass story and that made us excited about this story.
Yeah.
I mean, you
I'm
started with
glad.
a vanishing mysterious animal, which is step one at hidden compass. And,
All
Yeah.
stories must start with vanishing animals.
we have a thing for things that are about to go missing or that are missing.
It's true. We have a joke at Hidden Compass that the hidden compass is to find the things that are vanishing or disappearing.
Right.
Um,
Uh,
yeah, it's true. Vanishing animal, landscape, and transition. And then these beautiful narratives that frame that transition of this landscape and the disappearance of the animal. And like you mentioned, the 129 years is this this thing that pulls you into the story of what happened, and it frames it beautifully, because then you can, it being a time travel story, it shows you these two different eras.
Right. And I was also really excited being familiar with water issues in India and the things that happen upstream from the Sundarbans
Sure,
and all of that,
sure.
right? So I was particularly interested. I knew there would be a lot to dig into on that front. And so those are definitely things that excited us. But you just mentioned that you wanted to tell a story that was more animal centric, more environment centric, but there are two human narratives in this story. And so they're separated by a century and a half. But why did you want to thread those particular narratives together?
Well, yeah, I think first it was interesting to me that they came on either side of the shark's disappearance, right? So you have that the weaving of them doesn't feel forced right off the bat because you have that gap anyway.
Mhm.
Um, so you're not like trying to force these transitions in writing or anything. You can just kind of hard chop it, and it doesn't feel awkward. So that was the first. That's when I figured that it could work if the stories for whatever reason I wanted to put them in, right? That it could work just narratively. But then I talked about this in the piece obviously, but to me this Frenchman, and so there's a Frenchman named Lamar Piquois, that's his last name. Christophe Augustin Lamar Piquois is his full name. So in 1828, obviously he's like in the India for his third time actually, and he's going off from what was then Calcutta into the Sundarbans, right? And it's this kind of narrative of exploration that we are all vaguely familiar with, which is like a white Western European person who's going to somewhere that is neither of those things, and they've decided that they want to basically go into a place and take as much as they can, whether it's plants or animals, or often obviously people for the slave trade, take whatever they can and bring it back to wherever they are going, and whatever gives them prestige, right? And so in this case, this person was he described himself as a naturalist traveler. I think he was a former pharmacist. And so his prestige was going to come from whatever animals he was able to bring back, right? And this is a narrative we're all vaguely familiar with, and a kind of exploration, more importantly, that we're all vaguely familiar with. And it's one that's of extraction, right? For profit or prestige, or often both, for these white men. And then obviously the other side of the coin in this particular case is Alifa, who is a researcher, who's a woman from Bangladesh, and she is very engaged in place as well, but in a super different way.
Right.
In that she is trying to understand how the fishermen who are in these waters, how the sharks raise the fish, the governments that sort of control all of these waters and lands, and their and can affect their ecology through various policies, how these things interact, why there has been so much deterioration over time, and how that might be at least slowly righted into a place of, if not like wonderfulness, then at least like something that is not rapidly eroding into nothing.
Mhm.
And so going back to your question, that is why I wanted to sort of juxtapose these narratives of very different exploration in a very similar, in a very similar geographical location, perhaps not a very similar place given what has happened over those 129 years. But you can tell, very obviously, what the differences are in a person who goes to a place looking to take and build their own reputation, versus a person who is in a place trying to desperately and humbly learn and understand what it is about, and submitting themselves to the knowledge of the place and the people who are already there, as opposed to assuming that you're walking in with, I don't know, presuppositions about what that place is and how you can make it better.
Yeah.
And I thought
I
they were,
love.
they're just very different in every possible way that I could imagine. No, sorry, that's it. And then so I wanted to bring those two together in a way that felt at least as natural as I could.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I love that juxtaposition, and it makes readers think about exploration in the modern era. It is interesting to me because you mentioned that, Lamar's style of exploration is what we think of when we think of exploration, going and into uncharted waters. And the modern version that you highlight with Alifa isn't necessarily something people put in the exploration bucket. People say, okay, she's a researcher, she's a scientist, she's doing field research. But interesting that you put her in as an explorer.
Mm-hmm. I think we might be.
Yeah, I think actually it was in my head. The juxtaposition was there, and I think, if I'm remembering right, I think Katie actually said, these people are kind of. This is what you're describing is a different kind of exploration. And I was like, and she gave me this idea for the ending of it to sort of just like hit on that point to end the article that way. I think that's, I don't know, I think it was absolutely correct, because again, it was like in my head and I was writing it that way, but then she said that and I was like, that's absolutely right. Why don't we just like, I mean, I could frame it that way at the end, you know, because it's already, there's no forcing it. It doesn't feel forced at all. It is a kind of exploration. You have to explore the place and the people in it, their interactions, to understand it. And I think it's cool to reframe exploration that way, to have a deeper understanding of place. Probably something that we've all done in the last year, sitting wherever it is that we are. So, yeah.
Definitely. And there's also a scene in here where you write from the shark's point of view for a little bit,
Yeah.
which is a lot of fun to read, and it takes us into a different part of the world than that very same world that than we see as humans. Was that challenging? Was it fun? What do you think it adds to the story? I mean, certainly it's a scene that I love in this story, but what was that like for you as the writer?
Yeah, I mean, it was, I wanted to do it, and I had done it in I think the first draft, and then Katie sort of pushed me to do it even a little bit more, I guess, with more granular detail even. And I'm glad it was nerve-wracking to do a little bit, because I don't, as much as I wanted to, as I said earlier, bring a species to the forefront of the story, it's a little nerve-wracking to do that, because obviously you cannot talk to a shark. No one can even see, no one has even really seen these sharks, let alone spoken to them. And so I don't want to assume too much in the writing from that perspective, right? And so what I tried to do was just lean on things that I knew, and I knew for sure the kind of way in which the water quality had deteriorated. I knew what the water looked like to begin with, and I could tell, I knew what it looked like if you were to dive into it. I knew it was murky and muddy, and there was a lot of like just stuff around. And then I knew obviously that these fishing lines were everywhere, the nets were everywhere, the boats were all over the place, humming above the water. And based on what we know about how the shark travels, which is not a ton, but from what we do know, I can pretty much assume that the Ganges shark travels in waters where all those things are happening, you know, where there's murky water, where there are fishing lines into the nets, where there are boats humming above. So with those things in mind, I think I can at least frame kind of an idea of what it would be like to be that shark in these modern waters. And so I just tried to lean on that. And I'm glad, because like you said, at least it's a bit of a different perspective. So
yeah, it definitely adds a lot. We like to ask our contributors why they were inspired to write the stories, but we also sometimes like to ask why is this a story that we as an audience need to hear?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think that, well, we're already starting to see more coverage of environmental issues, even in, you know, very mainstream publications. Like New York Times, I think, has done a lot more, for an example, a lot more climate change and environmental reporting over the past even year. At least I feel like I've noticed that, like I said, somewhat significant uptick. There are publications, you know, solely for, you know, niche environmental issues that are popping up, I feel like, fairly regularly now. And I can't imagine that's going to do anything but increase. And I think, so just to speak to the need of a story like this, I do think there, you know, just will be a general need for talking about the environment, what people have done to it, what people are doing to it, and probably more importantly, what people can do to stop doing those things and perhaps make things a little better. I think that will become only more important throughout the rest of our lives, frankly. And I do think, though, in this story particularly, just because I think that there will become a need to understand how we got to where we are, in order to understand how we can, A, stop doing those things, and B, perhaps do a lot of the opposite of those things in order to make or at least to find ourselves in a little bit more of an ecological balance. And so I think if you can tie the damage that people in the past have done to a landscape or to a species or to both. With our present, we can understand how we got there and understand, like, when you look outside, what things are perhaps not doing wonders for the environment around us. And if you can understand a person like Alifa's work, you can understand how a person can go about making things better, and you can think about that at least a little bit in your own life. Not that it is, an individual responsibility, but you can look around and, I guess, better understand your place in the environment, and how it got to be the way it is. So I hope that the story did at least a little bit of that.
Wonderful. So we like to also talk about our hopes for any given story that we publish. And I'm going to go first because I want to. Because we've actually kind of talked about what my great hope for the story is already, which is that people will look at the juxtaposition of the two types of explorers and see the modern version as kind of the same badass version that we attribute to people like Lamar Piquet, right? And those explorers of that era, because of the, we talked about the pythons and the rhinos and all of those types of things, but there's a different way to explore now. It is modern. It is not about, as we've talked about, right? It's not about taking from a place. It's about understanding a place and understanding how we can be better stewards of a place and better citizens of a place. And so that is my big hope for this story.
Usually we have slightly different hopes, Siv, but in this case, that's also my hope for the story, which makes sense because we founded an entire company on this idea of celebrating a new age of exploration. And I have heard so often in my life that the age of exploration is over and that we have already charted all the waters, we've already explored, most of the world and maybe even the solar system, and there's not much left to discover. Right. And like Savani was talking about, and like your story shows so beautifully, we are at this totally different series of frontiers now. It doesn't look like the past, and that's a good thing. Right. In a lot of ways, it's more groundbreaking than it's ever been, because now we're not all of us, but a lot of us are thinking about how to live more consciously and more ethically on the planet. And so I will jump into the boat with Savani on her hope that that's what this story inspires for people.
I'm glad you're jumping into the boat with me on that, because we already jumped into a company on that.
Yes. Colin, are you founding a company based on this, or do you have a different hope?
I don't have a plan to found a company of this, no, but at least not yet. But yeah, I mean that was, I don't know if I mean, part of me did think about that as I was writing it, just like, I mean, both things that you both mentioned. That, these researchers like Alifa, they're kind of badasses, and not just like and not just because I want them to be, you know what I mean? I'm not just like trying to say that, but like she's literally sitting in a place like plunging knives and things into sharks.
Yeah.
Like I'm not doing that, like, so, and not that every person, every researcher is going to be slicing open sharks and then looking at them in a lab and things, but I mean, it's an objectively cool thing. So there is that. But also, yes, the whole history of, not the whole history, but certainly a lot of white exploration history is full of a lot of people going to a lot of places and learning nothing, right? And so, Alifa's there trying to learn actually what this place is about, what how did it work before, how is it working now, like why is it broken in so many ways, why is the water getting worse, why are the species disappearing, all manner of species disappearing, why are the fishermen in this cycle of poverty, and so that is an actual exploration of a place, whereas this Frenchman we talked about earlier went to a place and then he left, and that was it. You know what I mean? He took some rhinos, some tigers, some monkeys, and he left. You know, Alika doesn't. She's from Bangladesh. She wants to know this place, and you know, as you both said, that's a different kind of exploration, and one that we are really only at the precipice of across the planet. Because now, if we want to maintain life on this planet, we're going to have to actually understand it for once. And she's, you know, someone who's doing that. So yeah.
Yeah, you had mentioned earlier how Katie had thrown out the idea of, you know, framing or using the language of exploration. And I remember being in that editorial meeting and reading the draft of yours that came in that basically did that. And, you know, you had set the stage for this. And it was just an idea of looking at it and saying, this is what he's written, which is this thought-provoking piece about what a new age of exploration would look like. So I was excited to see that come through in the piece, because as Siv said, it checked so many boxes for Hidden Compass, and then it even went further than we had hoped. So thank you.
I'm very glad. Yeah, it just made sense. And so when, I don't know, sometimes an editor says something like, "All right, I was trying to do that. I just didn't like quite have the language, or it didn't quite click in my head." But yeah, and then it just made, I don't know, I wrote it in like 10 minutes. You know, sometimes it actually happens like that. Rarely.
Yeah.
But yes.
Wonderful. If people are excited about your work, as they should be after reading the story, where else can they go to learn and read more?
Well, I don't know. I mean, there are, I guess, a few places. So I have an article, Earth Island Journal published one of my favorite articles that I've written about, you know, it's also an exploration of place and colonialism. It's about sort of decolonizing the Nilgiris, which is a mountain range in southwest India that is kind of full of, well, it is full of these shoal forests, which are like these little shrubby forests amid like lots and lots of grassland,
right?
And how these things have been encroached upon over many years now, over centuries now, by eucalyptus and acacia trees that are not only damaging the environment because they suck up so much water and they don't really provide habitat for anything that lives there, that they're slowly pushing some species to extinction, and also these, well, some animal species to extinction, and also these very rare landscapes. And so I have a piece about that. A different piece that I really like is I wrote it for Deadspin, I think about a year ago, when I went up to the Himalayas to drive alongside people who were running 300 miles in the Himalayas, like insane people, truly insane, just absolutely insane. I'm a runner, and I would try to run ahead of these people just to take photographs, and we're like 17,000 feet, you know, up in the sky, and I was just like gasping, and I was running for maybe 50 meters, and they ran for 300 miles. I don't know how it happened. I still don't understand it, but I like that piece because it's a lot of place-based. I mean, as much as it's about a race, it's about a place that is absolutely barren, with like very few people who are around, but it's just like this kind of magic at the same time. You know, getting to watch like dust devils kind of move across a very empty landscape is a very strange experience when you're just one person watching it happen. You're like, okay, hope that doesn't come near me. All right.
Did you say they were running 300 miles?
300 miles. They ran 300 miles. Yeah.
Wow. I just wanted to make sure I heard that correctly, because I agree that is crazy.
Insane. It would be insane anywhere, but it was insane. They were in the Himalayas. They're insane.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, two of them actually finished it. Yeah, I don't understand. Yeah. I wrote it. I don't.
Well, if those of you who are watching want to understand more, it's Colin Daileda. That article is in Deadspin. He mentioned Earth Island Journal, and he also has a profile page with Hidden Compass, as all our journalists do. So you can go and read more about how cool he is and read more of his work. And if you love his story and you love us, as you should, you can contribute to his story's fundraising campaign. We get 50% of the proceeds. He gets 50% on top of his article pay, and you can help support the team behind the story.
Yes. And with that, we're excited to be back with you next week, where we will be talking to Morgan Tilton about her story, A River of Unknowns. But until then, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, Colin, for joining us. It was a lot of fun chatting with you.
Thank you so much to both of you. I really appreciate it.
Wonderful.
Of course. All right, everyone, take care and